Hello, welcome to another edition of On the Whistle. James is back. Good to see you, James. Unfortunately, for the third game in a row, we have to talk about a defeat. I've also just realised that I've left my coat in the press room, so if I start shivering during the recording of this no doubt high quality video...
But you are wearing a fine hat.
I am wearing a fine hat. I'll just show that there for the people of Sunderland to enjoy. There won't be much else to enjoy because that, unfortunately, well, the first half in particular was absolutely dismal. The second half, I suppose, was better, but they didn't actually create a lot. So it feels like, you know, for all that they dominated the game in the second half, actually Carl Rushford didn't have much to do until the goalkeeper went forward at the end. So,
but then weirdly, Patterson had that save. That attempt saved at the end, which was just incredible, really. What a story that would have been. Anyway, it didn't go in, and Sunderland didn't deserve it, let's face it.
And I suppose you could argue as well that even if they'd got a point, I'm not convinced how big a point that would have been. They needed a win today with the games coming up. And as you rightly say, you know, I think we've still been coming away talking about the first half because that was really, really poor.
I think it's 8 off the playoffs and 13 off the relegation now. So they are mid-table fodder.
It's proper mid-table. Let's get straight into the questions because we are not saying anything interesting.
No, not at all.
That's not what the people came for. So I'm going to go first with Tony Byrne, who asks, were you shocked at how much the loss of Jack Clarke took away from us? So I kind of guess I've got a couple of points to say in this. One, in that I'm not hugely surprised that there was a big drop off in quality in terms of Jack Clarke not being in the team. I think we've seen all season that he is the player who can bail Sunderland out when they don't play very well, and maybe that would have been the case again today. The other thing I would say is that I think you've got to say that in terms of the drop off from Clarke not playing, it is probably a responsibility shared because the change of system really did not work. And I thought that for all, you know, bar Roos and Job, any player you want to name, didn't step up to the mark today in terms of taking on the mantle from Clarke. It was similar to the Huddersfield game for me, where for much of the first half it didn't look to me like the players understood where they were supposed to be playing, what they were supposed to be doing. You know, Dodds has just been saying in there that he thought it was mainly about mentality, being more aggressive, getting to the second balls, and you know, I'm sure there's an element of that, but I thought it looked like a really confused performance. The only difference to Huddersfield was that Swansea were much better and took control of that. I thought it was a really muddled performance, so I wouldn't put it all on the players who came in for Clarke, because the last half hour of the game, for all that there weren't loads of chances, Sunderland looked loads better because it looked more familiar, it looked more settled, and I thought Wonder looked bright again. He put a good cross in. So yeah, I wasn't hugely shocked by how much there was a drop off from not having Clarke, but I also thought that the way they tried to play in the first half compounded his absence. If that
just
makes
to move
sense.
it on slightly, I thought what Mike Dodds said about Clarke in the post-match press conference was really interesting. These quotes will come out in due course, obviously, but quick summary, he sort of said that there's no replacing Jack Clarke because he's got 15 goals, he's the best winner in the league. But far from that being an excuse, he said people need to step up, and he sort of put that on the players, didn't he? Because there's no sort of tactical, there's no tactical shape that's going to negate the fact that Clarke's not there because he's not there. But the other players need to step up. I thought Roosen worked his knackers off today. I really did, without really getting too much in the way of service. And I think today sort of confirmed for me that he is really a wide forward rather than a striker. I think we've all sort of, myself included in this, right, Roosen's a striker, he can play up front, and I think he can, but he's not a out-and-out number 9 for me. He's a forward player who can play left, right and through the middle. He's not a Ross Stewart type number 9. We knew that anyway, sort of, but I think, we hinted at it during the week. Well, we're going to end up talking about strikers at some point, and probably for the rest of the season, because that's where the issues lie. The amount of balls that sort of go across goal and there's nobody at the front post. It's been sort of chronic when Roberts has been in the team. I know he wasn't in the team today, but previous matches, it's really frustrating. It's frustrating for everybody, us fans, everybody. It's a nightmare.
I think for much of the second half, actually, you know, the play, the sort of the wide areas were kind of okay, and that Sunderland got into crossing opportunities a lot. Sometimes the delivery wasn't great, but sometimes it was all right. So I kind of concur what you're saying. What I think it showed today was, like, Dodds made a really interesting point in terms of, you have to remember as well that Jack Clarke wasn't Jack Clarke when he came into the team.
He had very interesting.
He had to develop to get to the point where he is now to become this player, and we've got to show the same level of patience with the likes of Mundell, Barr, Aushish, and I totally agree with that. But I think the point you could make, and this isn't on Mike Dodds clearly, this is on the recruitment model, is that there are probably too many players in that category at the moment who aren't quite championship ready. And if we can say one thing for sure that these injuries have shown, is that the depth isn't quite there. A lot of talented players, a lot of players who might come good, but the balance hasn't been right this season. There have been too many who are finding their feet at this level, and when we have seen that when the likes of Robertson...
And just on that, you could argue that Barr's been here plenty of time now. and he was largely
But
anonymous today.
I think that Bar's
things
had
you
a,
can say.
in terms of his output, he's had a decent season. So
He has
poor today, but you can't argue that he's not a long way on from
But
where he was last year.
That's
He
the
clearly
thing with
is.
Bar, isn't it? The ceiling's high,
Yeah.
the basement's low.
But in terms of his output, he's developed a lot from where he was last year. He
Yeah,
is an
yeah,
inconsistent player,
That's
but
fair.
there's too many players, I think, this season who are on Bar's journey in terms of trying to find the settled position, trying to find some consistency.
Yeah,
And
I've
I
twisted
think
the
that's why.
dials too much.
Yeah, that's my view anyway. That was one question, and we've done 5 minutes. That's not a,
Right, let's whiz through some.
that's
Let's
not-
whiz through
that's
some.
not a
Come
great
on,
start.
let's go.
So, and the Apple 5 is the promotion push the season over. I think it basically is,
Yes,
to be honest,
it
because
is.
I think when I look at the next 3 games, it wouldn't surprise me if Sunderland got a decent set of results or beat one of these teams, because as we've talked about loads, it feels to me like they're a team who really steps up against better opposition, and when the intensity of the game's different, and when they're almost, they have to be at 110% to get something, they tend to respond to that.
Yeah.
So I actually envisage them playing really well over the next 3 games, and I think they'll probably beat
Yeah.
someone, and they might even get
Yeah,
a
yeah,
couple
yeah.
of positive results. However, they need to hit a run where they win 5 out of 6 or something
it's-
to that effect. And at the moment, they just don't look there. And 8 points is a huge gap. And
it's
I
the lack
don't
of-
see Coventry
the
or
lack
West
of
Brom jumping up.
consistency, the lack of depth, and the lack of strikes for me. And I think West Brom, Hull all have depth. Obviously, West Brom have ended up with Jan and Villa, all of that sort of stuff. They've got the experience, and they've got the squad to sort of absorb a couple of these injuries, and they just look stronger than Sunderland at the moment.
So another question is, I had it up and now it's gone. Don't you think the lack of experience was tangible in the first half? What team with so little experience ever got promoted? I sort of agree with this, and I don't quite. I don't necessarily think the first half was an experience thing. I think the setup was wrong in that I think the team looked a bit muddled. I thought Swansea were excellent, by the way. Like, you're already looking at it and thinking next season they could be a serious team.
What Luke Williams said was really interesting on that, by the way, when he said he was asked whether he set up sort of expecting Sunderland to play like they did in the first half with that tactical formation, and he said no, absolutely not. So I think sort of Mike Dodd's outthought himself there.
Yeah, I think it would be... like, he obviously did an amazing job at Notts County. I didn't see his teams, but I'm obviously aware of how good they were. But looking at them today, I think, wow, I think there might be a serious. Well, they were a bit better than decent in the first half. Let's be fair, they were really
decent.
really
I'm doing a Roy Keane here.
So,
you're all right.
So I think that what I would say is that, like, I do think the lack of experience is an issue, and I think it needs to be addressed in the summer. I don't necessarily put that down the first 45 minutes today. I just think Sunderland were off the pace, and I don't think the setup was quite right, and I think Swansea exploited it. So I agree with the basic point, but I wouldn't put that high on my list today. What do you think?
I tend to agree, but I have thoughts, but we'll go to the next question because we're running out of time.
Okay, the next question is... Well, I've got to look for the next question anyway, so give some of your thoughts while I get the next question up.
Yeah, I think tactically in the first half, Sunderland just got it wrong. Mike Dodd's admitted to it. I think he fell into the trap maybe. His sort of greatest moment as Sunderland interim head coach was against Leeds United, wasn't it? And he really did a number tactically on Daniel Farker, set up really well. Sunderland's players all bought into it. They nailed that setup against the opposition, and I think he's maybe just overthought it again. Obviously, you have to preface that with Dan Ballard was out, Jack Clark was out, so he did have to think of something.
Yeah.
And we all looked at the team sheet and none of us went, right, that doesn't make any sense. It did make sense. I can see what he's trying to do. It's not a complete howler. It just didn't work, and you will get that at times. It's just happens.
And the one thing I would say is today didn't work and stuff. I would rather have the head coach who makes really attacking substitutions and tries to get more attackers on the pitch if he can, and tries to get up the pitch as much as he can. It didn't work, but I would rather.
He said that, didn't he? He said, I'm not going to do reckless things, but I will make bold decisions, and I think that's fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go to the last question because this is a bit of a big one. So we'll finish on this one and give it a couple of minutes. So this is from Speak Sunderland. Thanks for sending this in. It says, after the next run of games, we can/will be closer to relegation than playoff points wise. What went wrong and where? I think Sunderland will be pretty much where they are now in 3 games. Because as I've said, I'm going to make a prediction here that I think they will get at least one positive result from the next 3 games. Because I feel
Southampton and
Norwich next weekend. I feel like it's kind of in their DNA a little bit at the moment that I think they really rise to those, especially those open games where it becomes a bit basketball-y. I think
when they're expected to win, they don't. When they're not, they do.
Yeah, that tends to be. I think that is the character of this team a bit. So I don't think they'll be close to the playoffs necessarily. I think they'll be about where they were. So it's a slightly more optimistic take. But in terms of the fundamental question, there's no point that
we should have a podcast on the second bit.
Yeah. There's no point denying that it's gone badly wrong. I'd say a couple of things. I think one, that I'm not going to try and rewrite history and say that everything was perfect under Tony Mowbray and that the team was flying and they were heading for the playoffs. The form was a bit patchy. What I would also say is, I do not think the recent run of results would have been as bad under Tony Mowbray.
No,
and fundamentally, what did they get wrong? I think that they sacked a manager at a key point in the season and didn't recruit an upgrade.
Yeah,
And I think that it has really derailed the season. I think it has really derailed the identity of this side. The one thing you can say, they frustrated the life out of us. They didn't take chances, but you knew how they were going to play it. And more often than not, they dominated championship games, and all the underlying data reflected that. So my fundamental opinion is that it went wrong. And some people will say it was the right decision to move on from Mowbray. Fair enough, I respect that. I don't agree, but I understand it. But fundamentally, sacking him when they did, not having a replacement lined up, and not getting an upgrade, I think it's the biggest issue. I would also say that, as I said, I think the balance has gone too far.
Yes, I was going to say that Mowbray issue is half of it.
Yeah, I think the balance has gone a little bit too far, and I think that there are too many players in the squad who aren't yet at championship level. I don't have a problem with bringing in players who take time to settle and who you think is going to be a bit of a hidden gem. You have to think outside the box of recruitment. Bringing in players from abroad where the prices are lower, I understand them totally. But I think at the moment the squad is too lopsided.
It is very, very lopsided. There's no doubt that sort of having the likes of Bath, Gooch, Pritchard would have helped, it would have contributed this season. Absolutely, Pritchard did contribute this season. You know, his contract situation was handled poorly. For me, the head-scratching thing is that Sunderland fans' expectations have been raised, partly by the performances of last season, partly by what they've been told. The stated aim was, I think the exact quote is, you know, we're not satisfied with the playoffs, we want to push on. You know, ownership, Speakman have talked about the Premier League, and you get this message of high performance culture and striving for the best and wanting to improve and push on. And these signings may well come good for the club eventually, but in terms of sort of depleting the squad of every experienced player in it, it's backfired massively. It really has. And I don't think, you know, Sunderland fans aren't looking at these players coming in and going, they're absolutely rubbish, we shouldn't have signed them, all of this sort of stuff. There's an acknowledgement, and a lot of people are happy to see these players develop and don't mind that, but you do have to have a good balance just in life generally.
Yeah.
And I think on this issue it's key.
Yeah, I think if you look at the team that went up from League One, it had loads of exciting young players in it, but it had that
Bailey,
core.
right, Alex Pritchard.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think the balance has been quite right, and I think, yeah, you see it today when some of those players who aren't available come out of the team. There is a big drop off, and that doesn't mean the other players aren't hugely talented. So I think that's something to reflect on. And when we talk,
it's the depth as well for me.
And that's the strategy right from the very top. We shouldn't. Much of that debate, in my opinion, gets focused on Christian Speakman.
I agree.
Christian Speakman works to a budget and a strategy that's dictated to by the board and the owner. It's not Christian Speakman's strategy. He doesn't not want to play with an experienced number 9 or not want to sign proven players. He is working to a budget, and that dictates the decisions he makes.
To go back to that manager situation as well, we had the discussion on the Raw podcast, who makes that decision? Is it half Christian Speakman, half Kira Louis-Dreyfus? A lot of the time it's a collaboration, but the owner does make the final say. If he says something goes. He
dictates the strategy and, most importantly, the budget. And
has the purse strings.
And I think that debate has been a little bit skewed sometimes in terms of, obviously we have to scrutinise Christian Speakman's decisions, but in terms of the finding, you know, the overarching strategy, it's not his, it's what he's working to. So listen, thanks everyone for sending the question. The one thing I wanted to say was that for me the highlight of the day by a long way was the reception Tony Mowbray got in the 60th minute. I thought that was absolutely outstanding. I thought it was brilliant.
The shirts as well before the game.
I thought it was such a lovely moment, and I thought what a special thing that someone who isn't from Sunderland actually comes from a I'm not going to say
rival area.
I'm not going to say Derby club
no.
because it's not. It's a fiercely contested local rivalry. But someone who comes from another club in the area, who wasn't actually here all that long.
No,
but to have made
just over a calendar year.
To have made such a huge impact on the players, the fans, the staff, I think that is testament to what man Tony Mowbray is. And I was so pleased that everyone showed how much they sort of love him today, and I'm sure it'll mean an awful lot to him. So on behalf of us as well, I don't think Tony Mowbray watches our YouTube.
Well, you
videos,
never know. You never know.
You know,
if
we're
you're
obviously
Mogger,
wishing Tony Mowbray the very best. A truly great man. And I'm so pleased that sort of today reflected that. So thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for sending your questions in. Back next week at Norwich, hopefully with a win. Surely it's going to be with a win next week.
Yeah, please get in touch with your comments on social media and YouTube if you found something you enjoy in this video in terms of a talking point. If you have another question, we'll try and pick it up on the Raw podcast or next week when we do another one of these. It'll just be you, I think, for Norwich. But we shall see how it pans out. Thank you again for watching.